Welcome to the FangledCast, brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand. Hey everybody, welcome back to the FangledCast. This is Andrew Deutsch with Fangled Technologies, and today I've got a relatively new friend of mine, Jason Cutter, who's a sales guru and wrote an incredible book called Selling with Authentic Persuasion, and his company, Cutter Consulting. Hey, Jason Cutter, how did you come up with that name, Cutter Consulting?
I don't know. I was going through a lot of different ideas and I thought, hey, I might as well just name it after myself.
I figured. Tell me a little bit about your book.
I wrote the book, Selling with Authentic Persuasion. The subtitle, which could have been the title as well, is Transform from Order Taker to Quota Breaker, which a lot of people can identify with if they're in sales and they're struggling and they got into sales like I did as, just not a lifelong goal. Or if they run a sales team and they have people on their team that aren't performing. Order taker usually fits. And for me, it was really about looking at this framework, looking at everything I did for myself and with the teams I worked with, and boiling it down to this framework I call authentic persuasion.
Interesting. One of the things I really wanted to talk to you about, we've talked about in the past, so it's kind of, I'm throwing a softball out there, is that the actual recruiting process, when you're starting to put a sales team together, what are the traits that you look for in a salesperson to be part of a sales team?
The biggest things is I'm looking for the traits that are going to match well with the sales role. And every sales role is going to be different. Like you said, whether it's retail, call center, is it a one call close? Is it a 6-month enterprise sales cycle? So I'm looking for those traits that fit. And it's definitely going to be their openness and their curiosity, things like their persistence and how they manage the conversations and the process, because I want that to match up with what the job's going to be.
Sure. Yeah, curiosity is one of my favorite topics to talk about. There's another podcast that we did with Mike Vistas from Inquizo, I'm sorry, who's an expert in levels of curiosity and how to raise levels of curiosity within entire organizations, not just sales, and how it increases productivity. But in a salesperson, when you look at that trait, curiosity, as a subject, and I agree 100%. What is it about a curious person that makes them a better salesperson and not an order taker?
From everything that I've seen, the curious person, when focused on, the right aspects of the sales role, which is helping qualified customers, helping the right potential customers become customers for the right reasons in the right ways, they always want to know the deepest level of why. They want to know the deepest level of what makes that person tick or that company tick, what they want, why they want it, what keeps them up at night. The why that they can then turn around and determine if they can solve or not. And if they can solve that why, then it's game on. Then everything becomes easier. And that's really what they're going after, the deepest why of anything they're curious about.
What do you think the difference in reaction between a curious person and an order taker when they get a no?
The order taker, because of many different reasons, which we could go on lots of discussions about that. But they don't like the confrontation. They don't want the drama. They don't know how to push people forward. They feel bad. Usually where that comes from is they were a customer who was manipulated or forced or controlled, or they have a controlling parent or a controlling relationship. And so they don't want to be a hypocrite. They don't like doing that to other people. Someone says no. Okay. I hate it when I say no. And then people push me. You say no. That's great. Here's some information. Call me. Curious person wants to know why the no is happening, what is behind it, because if it's a good fit, they have problem X, I have solution X. That no doesn't mean anything to me. That's some kind of smokescreen, or they don't understand something. And so I want to get at the deepest level because we're going to keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was working in the tapes industry, we were doing research to see how distributors of tape products, high end, not box tape, but high performance tape. And when we would call some of the major distributors, the names that people have, the big thick book on their desk, who I won't name to avoid getting sued, but you would call them and say, "I'm looking for a tape that can do this, this, and that." And their response was, "We have 1 million items in our catalog, and our biggest supplier is X. Please go on their website and see what you need, and then I can quote you some prices." Now,
Oof.
Other distributors that we would go to, they had knowledge bases, they had uh, experts that they could reach out to, they could transfer you to someone more technical. And it's really interesting because truly a company with 1 million items in their catalog, uh, the tendency to have order takers is probably significantly higher. When you're dealing with call centers that have multi SKU that sell into multiple different industries, multiple different places, how do you approach that as opposed to we supply to, let's say, the HVAC industry and everything we have is for those guys in terms of the training and the work?
Typically what I've found the most successful is understanding the limitations of most people. I mean, of course, there's superstars, there's superhumans, there's savants that will memorize all, million SKUs and know all the products and know everything about an industry. Generally, they're not always the best salespeople because they're too analytical and they're too in their
Mm-hmm.
head. But what I've always found the most success with is just, separating out the teams and having salespeople who are experts in one area as much as possible, such that they know that. And if it's in their realm, it's a home run. If it's not in their realm, who else could be that expert that could take care of it? Now, sometimes that's just not possible. If you look at like a retail furniture store example, like, I have a client that has that. Somebody walks in, you've got to know everything. You've got to know everything in the store, all the options, because you just never know. And you can't just hand somebody off.
Right.
So you've got to be good at enough of it and understand enough. And then that's where the curiosity comes in. I think that's the biggest part that I found. I don't generally know everything about every SKU, every product being sold, every service. I'm just curious enough and ask enough questions that I can figure it out and narrow it down and then know where we need to go.
Yeah, I think the most powerful lesson I learned was the ability to go, I really don't know, but I know where to get that answer. Can I get back to you?
Yep.
And the
Yep.
second lesson was that you had to get back to them.
Yeah, and most salespeople are afraid to say that they don't know, right?
Yeah.
But if you ask questions and you show that you care, then it's not that you don't know because you're just an idiot and you just don't care. It's
Hmm.
that I care, I don't know, let me find out. And then,
Yeah.
like you said, you have to actually get back to them and know why you're getting back to them, and then move forward. Which again, the order taker doesn't want to get back to them because then there's another chance they could say no, and so they'd rather just let it die off and hope that person calls back with money in hand.
Yeah, and the more technical the product is, the more you need to have those resources available.
Mhm.
I know we were talking before about our new program that we're working on, where we've perfected an AI system, which is basically a way for us to be able to predict based on past history of similar personas within specific markets what products those people would want. And it's about resolving lots of problems that are out there. And I'm sure you've come across it. For example, new hires come on. What's the time frame to get from I don't know anything to being a proficient salesperson? You've got the
Yeah.
sales guy who's been around for 20 years, making enough money that he's happy, doesn't leave his house until 10 a.m., hasn't opened up a new customer in forever because he's already satisfied with what he's got, and everyone in between. So it's so funny because I go on LinkedIn and these people. These are the 10 things your salespeople need to know. Here's five tips, 5 keys. I know you're not that guy. How do you dig in and adapt so that you can do training and work with sales teams to alleviate all of those kinds of problems?
It's interesting that you say that because on one side, my primitive brain imposter syndrome ego kicks in as I'm scrolling through LinkedIn as well and seeing that and going, I don't have this 10-step framework that everyone must follow. And
Yeah.
the reason why is I coach, I consult, I build, like I sell, and like I help people sell, which is it's not one size fits all. I might have one or two solutions out the other end, but how that works for somebody and what
Hmm.
they're going to get from it totally different every time, right? I'm not a cookie cutter salesperson. Even if I had, let's call it one SKU, if I sold one thing, it's still custom every time because it's a conversation. I'm helping them. If it's not, I'm just an order taker. And so I don't have that framework. And so for me, it's understanding that just like your every customer is different, every persona is different, every person you're talking to is different that you want to sell to. Every organization, every salesperson is different, and then the training they need, where they're at, like you said, that scale of the veteran who thinks they've got it made and they're just on easy street, and what do you do with them? What do you do with a new person that was selling t-shirts last week and now they're selling, SaaS platforms in a call center this week. What do you do with them? It's all just different. It's understanding that everybody is different. There's a framework, there's some foundations. How everyone uses those tools, how everyone uses a hammer might be a little bit different. And so working with everyone on an individual basis.
Yeah, and creating those tools depending after the research is done, and of course being curious is certainly an attribute that gets you forward in that process. But we were talking earlier about the churn and burn sales strategy. Back in the 80s, the car dealers, and I assume they still do this today, they used to call it rabbit hiring because rabbits breed. So they would hire 20 guys a week new on the dealership, knowing that every one of those guys, to try to keep the job, has 6 friends that need a car. So they hire a guy, the guy would sell 5 or 6 cars, and then they would churn, burn out, and be gone, and the next crew would come in. So the training wasn't anything special for sales, and the ones that stood out would remain in the dealership. But it was never a process. And the interesting was eventually nobody wanted to work at a car dealer, and the supply ran out, and the dealers had to professionalize. Nowadays, I see it in these massive distribution companies that sell industrial supplies. They'll hire 20 guys expecting 2 to survive. There was one group that I worked with. They have a thing called the Wolf Pack. They hire fresh out of college, put them in suits, and they work them to the bone, hoping that maybe 1 or 2 of them would end up being sales executives going forward. And the other ones, fresh college grads, now on their resume have a 3-month stint.
A 3-month stint and somewhere between dislike, distaste, or hatred for sales and selling because of what they think it's like, just solidifying the bad reputation that sales has in the world. Yeah, and definitely not how I operate, definitely not what I focus on. I mean, I think that's, even if you had an environment where it was commission only, let's say you brought in 20 people to make it, but it didn't cost you much as an organization, the morale damage that does for everyone that stays and what that vibe is like. I mean, I just always look at that, and in my experience, that just tells me there's a toxic environment and or a complete lack of mission, vision, and core values that are aligning things. Yes, not everyone's going to work out. You can't do it 100% of the time. You're not going to have zero turnover in a sales in any organization. However, if that's your model and you're expecting it, you're missing all these things. You should have a better retention. I mean, the last company I worked at before going into consulting, one of the things the owner taught everyone and said is that if we have to fire somebody, if we have to let somebody go, it means we failed them. It means we either we shouldn't have hired them, or we didn't support them enough in being successful. But if we fire them for a lack of performance, that's on us. We failed as a company.
And when you're creating, voracious advocates for your brand, one of the key tenets to that really is being a consistent company. They're the argument for like McDonald's. There are people who go to McDonald's that not because they necessarily like, but they know they're going to get the same thing every time they go.
Correct.
That consistency. There are people who frequent the same stores and the same businesses because they're used to that familiar face who brings them back every time. So as a industrial supplier who is changing the salesperson to your key clients or your not so key clients every 90 days, the chances of being able to continue that business, no matter how well you perform as a distributor or manufacturer, diminishes greatly. So it really does do damage to the brand of the company.
And for me, what I've seen is where there's usually a terrible misalignment where a company wants clients, customers, buyers long-term. They want someone, let's say you're a distributor company example, right? They want somebody who goes to them for their distributor needs, right? For whatever it is that they're selling. They want that person long-term. They want that person to be buying from them for years. And then they treat their employees like they're disposable. They don't put in the resources. They don't care about them, and they churn a lot, but they still expect their customers to not churn a lot. And that doesn't work. Like, how you treat whatever you want from your customers is how you also need to treat your employees. If you want customers for life, you need to treat it like you want your employees for life, even if they don't work out. But that's the mode that you have, because then they're going to relay that to the customers and then build those relationships as well.
Yeah. It's funny. I get in these conversations with people, and if you want to set me off, just to get me on one of my soapbox rants, tell me people don't like to be sold. They don't like it to be salesy. And what that tells me is that they don't know what they're doing. I joke it's kind of like romance. If both parties aren't enjoying it, it probably isn't happening the way it's supposed to happen. You're not doing it
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's, to say you don't like to be sold means I don't like to be closed. I don't like to be manipulated. I don't like to be misled. I don't like to not be listened to.
Correct.
How does that incorporate into the kind of training and the work that you do with your clients?
I agree. I mean, I think the intention of what you're saying is absolutely correct. And I super agree. I think the words I would use, I don't think people like to be sold to. They like to buy, but they like to buy from a professional who is going to help them decide. They need help deciding. If they didn't need help deciding, they would have ordered it online. They would have called into customer service, right? Like you can get everything you need online. So if I'm actually talking to someone to potentially buy something, it's because I need their help. Right? I don't need information. I need help. And so I don't necessarily want someone to sell me, but you're right. In the terms of the manipulation, the tricks, I don't want that. But I'm a super eager buyer. If you're good, you help me with a solution and you're like, hey, it's going to be $3,000. I'm like, okay, I'll grab my card. I mean, I always buy like I try to help other people buy. So I'm not a hypocrite. So when I hire a mentor or a coach, I usually shock them because I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, you helped me. I want your help. So I think that's key. And what I think you're right about relationships and courtship, right? No one wants to be, tricked into going on a date or into a relationship or lied to or manipulated, but everyone likes to be courted. Everyone likes to feel special. Everyone likes to feel like they're somebody wants them to be happy and successful and they're the ones to get them there, like go out on a date and have a nice time. Everyone wants that. And when you extend that into the sales role, just do that. That's basically it.
Yeah, at the end of the day, being sold means somebody listened to you, recognized your need, want, problem, pain, whatever it was, and provided you with a solution. Who doesn't want to have their problem solved?
Mm-hmm.
That's
it.
And who isn't willing to pay to have their problem solved when it truly is solved?
Yep.
So
agreed.
That to me is the core of what is sales. So at this point, I always ask my favorite question to the folks on the podcast. What question didn't I ask you that I should have asked you that you want to tell people about?
Can anyone be successful in sales and can anyone use authentic persuasion?
And the answer?
Should I answer it too?
Absolutely.
I don't.
That's the
goal. For me, I think so. I mean, if there's some certain traits that people have to be successful in sales and in life in general that I've seen, we've talked about some of them: curiosity, persistence, creativity, openness. When you have those combined with a desire to be authentic, you can be successful. I mean, I'm living proof of this. I came from a very analytical household. My mom was a banker who actually hated salespeople. I grew up in an anti-sales household. My bachelor's degree is in marine biology. I tagged sharks for years. I didn't want to go into sales, yet here I am. And so I think anybody who doesn't fit the mold of natural born salesperson is actually better because that's what customers want. They want real people. So I truly feel like anybody can be successful in sales if they want to be.
So you've tagged sharks. Was it Mark Cuban? Which one?
No, I never got to that level. I left
Never
before
tagged one of those guys.
before that show came out. No, I haven't, but maybe I will. That's an interesting thing to think about is to step up my game.
First. So tell me,
go.
if someone wants to get in touch with Jason Cutter from Cutter Consulting or buy your book, how can they find you?
Simplest thing, jasoncutter.com. That's a hub for everywhere. So they can find the book through there. They can find my consulting. They can find my own podcast, LinkedIn, blog, all kinds of stuff, jasoncutter.com.
And we're running a promotion today. The first person to buy his book today gets to pay retail.
Excellent.
How's that for a great promotion?
That's a great deal.
Thanks so much for being on, Jason. It was really a pleasure chatting with you. I'm glad to have you in the network and as someone I consider to be a friend.
Thanks for having me.
Brought to you by Fangled Technologies, where we help you convert every person your company touches into a voracious advocate for your brand.